So I'm finally coming to a close on this particular build. Almost a year. Next month will be a year that I would have originally got the call for this job and started on it. I didn't get to start on it until October due to waiting and a shipping screw up for the hardtail. Tiny bit of a backstory on this. It's for a buddy of mine across town here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area of Texas. He drove around Texas looking at bikes. He's already got a couple old cars, old hot rods, and pickup trucks. He wanted to add a vintage chopper to the collection. And he drove around, getting the runaround, bikes that wouldn't run, or parts missing, or there was no title. That's usually another biggie. And finally I got hit up and he was like, hey man, could you build me a bike? And I said, sure, that's no problem. And as it turns out, he went ahead and got a 74 Ironhead right side shift, almost stock, in good running condition though, and almost all there, which for what we were going to do didn't really matter too much since most of it was going to end up going. And anyhow, got dropped off here, and here we are 11 months later. So I'm going to go ahead and get into the bike. And here we are now from stock Ironhead. And before I go any further, if there's any of you that are interested in what the stock bike was and the build process, those videos are on my channel. So everything from when it rolled into this is there if you're interested. Everything on this is me, except for the paint and the engine detailing. Everything else is me. The hardtail, like I had stated, the only thing that's left of this from a stock Ironhead Sportster is the frame from about right there, here, to there. That little front half is stock and the front end. Everything else is new. This seat is an eBay piece that the customer found. And this sissy bar is all me. This is all hand heated, hand twisted. Whenever it came time for plating, he did bring up something to me that I was unaware of, which was, he was like, hey, you know, my plater can do the same part chrome and part gold. And he had run it by me if I thought that doing these points would look good in gold, because his idea for the whole bike was a combination of chrome, polished, gold, and brass rather than all one thing, which was totally cool with me. I thought it was a good idea, and I always like mixing metal finishes. So the plater was able to do that with those tips. And it carries on through. I'm going to grab this light so you guys can see. It carries on through to this brake pedal, which I also had fabbed myself. This whole brake system is my design and my pieces. I've seen a lot of these converted to hydraulic, which is what I had done with this over the factory drum. This is a 4-piston hydraulic. I believe 11.5-inch rotor. And I've seen a lot of these hydraulic conversions where they've done forward controls, but I have not seen any with mid controls. And I've seen on a lot of forums people asking about a kit and how someone had done it. But this was what I came up with, and I had modified this peg perch shaft to accept a brass bushing. And I put a grease zerk in it for easy lube. And then there's a Heim joint that comes off of this handmade pedal. And when you depress the pedal, it pushes on this link, which I also made. And you're actually able to adjust your pedal ride height on this extra length of thread that I left on the Heim joint. And that, of course, goes to this master cylinder, which is late model Sportster, which would be mounted on the right side of the bike, but I had made my own perch for it. I don't know if I can get in there, on the left-hand side, and was able to mount the whole thing behind the license plate and tail light. So it came out really clean. And we had hydraulic mid controls. And the thinking was, since we were getting rid of the front brake completely, to just double down on the rear. So, like I said, 4-piston and 11.5-inch rotor. I had mounted this skull form, brass. And here we got the brass headlight with polished aluminum housing. It does have the modern H4 LED bulb in it. And the bracket for that is also mine. I had come up with something to come off of the original headlight housing mounting bolts, and was able then to make this perch for that skull, and then it just drops down in there. Nice and clean. I didn't want to take this cover off and make a bracket off of the two clamping bolts of the tree. I've seen that done, and I didn't care for it. So I went ahead and just made my own bracket. And he wanted braided lines for the whole oiling system. So we got those in for the cooler, running back, return line. I used AN style fitting covers over all the clamp connections. Again with the gold. Same thing with the carb. And we got the brass oil lines. I had made these side panels in here to take up that gap. I didn't really care for that when I looked at a lot of these custom Ironhead builds. Whichever way you mount that tank, whether it's in front of or behind the seat post of the frame, I never liked that big gap opposite. So I made those panels to take up the gap. And what happened as a consequence of it that I had not planned was this panel on the other side, I was able to mount the start button and the ignition switch button, or ignition key, I should say, up in there. And since it comes off the edge, the leading edge of the fender to the seat post, it had made like a triangle pocket in there. And the little wiring that this thing has, which is essentially just a relay and a breaker, it's all in there, which worked out great because with these Frisco tanks, there's no tunnel to hide anything, so, you're all smooth. That backbone tube right there has a solid internal slug in it, so there's no way to run internal wiring, and that whole thing worked out great. Plus it took up that space. I always spend a lot of time with anything that I'm building, studying the whole profile of the build, and open and closed spaces is something I'm always looking at, because I feel like it can make or break anything if you've got the wrong proportions. And then in this area, you also had the Chromer do this battery box. This actually was a lowbrow piece that I cut completely in half in the bandsaw and narrowed it And this is actually the new battery for this bike, which you can see compared to a traditional sized rectangle motorcycle battery. The biggest issue was clearing this chain, because this is such a narrow bike with that 2.5-inch rear wheel. And the other thing was, I didn't want to raise that battery box and have it sticking over the edge of this lower frame rail to fit it and clear the chain. I wanted it all in there. So that new lithium anti-gravity battery was perfect for that. And of course the gas cap, continuing with the whole gold theme. The pipes are Paco upsweeps, straight out of the box. And that's about it, man. I mean, these are really simple bikes. So, thanks guys for following along with another build. I appreciate your support. And I'll see you down the road when we get to the next day.